The silence in the garage hit Vanessa like a punch to the stomach. Where her cherry red 1967 Corvette should have been sitting, there was nothing but an oil stain on the concrete floor and the lingering smell of rubber tires. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the empty space, her business trip luggage still clutched in her trembling hands. She had cut her conference short in Atlanta, eager to surprise Robert after 3 weeks apart. The house felt different when she walked in. There were expensive shopping bags scattered across the living room, designer labels she'd never seen before. A cruise brochure lay open on the coffee table showing a luxury suite that cost more per night than most people made in a month. Credit card receipts were spread across the kitchen counter like confetti, each one showing purchases that made her stomach turn. A $3,000 Gucci handbag, a $1,500 pair of shoes, jewelry that cost more than their mortgage payment. "Robert?" she called out, her voice echoing through their suddenly foreign-feeling home. No answer. His truck was gone too, but that wasn't what made her knees weak. Her Corvette, the car she'd saved 3 years to buy, the car that represented her freedom and independence, was gone. She grabbed her phone with shaking fingers and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. On the third try he finally picked up. "Hey babe, you're back early?" His voice was too bright, too cheerful. She could hear music and laughter in the background, the sound of people having fun while her world crumbled. "Where's my car, Robert?" Pause. Too long of a pause. "Oh, it's at Tony's shop. Remember that weird noise it was making? I figured I'd get it checked out while you were gone." She knew every sound her Corvette made. It had been purring like a kitten the day she left. "What shop?" "Tony's been closed for 2 months. Another pause. She could almost hear him scrambling for another lie. "I mean, the new place. Downtown. Look, can we talk about this when I get home? I'm at a work thing." The laughter in the background didn't sound like any work event she'd ever attended. It sounded like celebration. Like victory. "I'll wait up," she said quietly and hung up. But she didn't wait. She drove to every auto shop in a 20-mile radius. No one had seen her Corvette. She called the police, but they told her that since Robert was her husband, there wasn't much they could do without proof of theft. She needed documentation. Back home, she went through their paperwork with desperate efficiency. The car title was in both their names, but buried in a stack of mail she found something that made her blood run cold. A bill of sale dated 3 days ago. Robert had sold her Corvette to someone named James Henderson for $45,000. The signature looked like hers, but she knew she'd never signed it. She sank into their kitchen chair, staring at the forged document. $45,000. Gone. And from the shopping bags and receipts scattered around, she could see exactly where that money had gone. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for the amazing cruise, baby. Can't wait to spend every penny. Love you." The message was followed by a photo that made her stomach lurch. A woman with bleached blonde hair and fake nails was posing in what looked like a luxury cruise ship suite, wearing jewelry Vanessa had never seen before. In the background, she could see Robert's distinctive watch lying on the bedside table. The woman looked young. Too young. And she was wearing earrings that cost more than Vanessa made in 2 months. Vanessa screenshot the message before it could be deleted. Then she sat in her empty garage, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and betrayal, and realized that her marriage had been a lie for longer than she wanted to admit. The expensive gifts, the mysterious work events, the business trips that seemed to happen more and more frequently, it all made sense now. Her phone rang. Robert again. She let it go to voicemail, then listened to his message. "Hey, running late tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." Well, the word felt like poison in her ears. She walked back inside and looked at the shopping bags again. Each receipt told a story of betrayal. A $500 dinner at the most expensive restaurant in town on the night he told her he was working late. A hotel room charge for 2 nights while she was visiting her sick mother. Lingerie in a size that definitely wasn't hers. The cruise brochure was the final insult. 7 days in the Caribbean, presidential suite, all meals included. The total cost was exactly $45,000. The same amount he'd gotten for her Corvette. Vanessa had always been the responsible one in their marriage. She worked 60-hour weeks as a financial consultant, paid most of the bills, and saved every penny she could. The Corvette had been her one indulgence, bought with money she'd earned through overtime and weekend work. It wasn't just a car, it was proof that she could have something beautiful, something that was entirely hers. And Robert had sold it to buy his mistress a vacation. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on their couch, surrounded by evidence of his betrayal. But instead of crying, she found herself getting angry. Really angry. The kind of cold, calculating anger that came from being underestimated. Robert thought he was clever. He thought she was too trusting, too busy with work to notice what he was doing. He thought he could steal from her and she would just accept it, maybe cry a little, maybe leave quietly without making a fuss. He was wrong. Vanessa opened her laptop and started taking pictures of every receipt, every piece of evidence. She forwarded the text message to her own email. She made copies of the forged bill of sale. Then she started researching lawyers. If Robert wanted to play games, she was going to show him what it meant to play against someone who understood money, contracts, and consequences. Someone who had spent years building a reputation for being thorough, patient, and absolutely ruthless when it came to getting results. The last thing she did before going to bed was call her bank and check their joint account balance. It was almost empty. 3 months ago, they'd had $60,000 in savings. Now there was less than $2,000. She had work to do. Vanessa woke up at 5 a.m. sharp, just like she had every weekday for the past 10 years. But today was different. Today she had a mission that went beyond quarterly reports and client meetings. She made coffee in silence, listening for any sign that Robert had come home. His side of the bed was cold and undisturbed. She dressed carefully, her best black suit, the one that made her look serious and professional. Then she drove to downtown and found the office of Patricia Wells, the divorce attorney her colleague had recommended. Patricia was a small woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She listened without interruption as Vanessa laid out the evidence, the receipts, the forged signature, the text message, the bank statements she'd printed at 3 a.m. "This is fraud," Patricia said bluntly, examining the bill of sale. "Forging your signature on a legal document is a felony. And if this car was titled in both names, he needed your consent to sell it. What are my options? Criminally? You could press charges. Civilly? You could sue for theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. But first, I think we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. I'm going to recommend you hire someone to do a full investigation." Patricia slid a business card across the desk. "Marcus Thompson. Best private investigator in the state. Discreet, thorough, and he owes me a favor." An hour later, Vanessa was sitting across from Marcus in a coffee shop that smelled like hope and possibilities. He was younger than she'd expected, with kind eyes and an expensive notebook that he filled with careful handwriting as she told her story again. "I can have preliminary results in 48 hours, Marcus said. "Full report within a week. But I have to ask, are you sure you want to know everything? Sometimes the truth is worse than we imagine." Vanessa thought about the empty garage, the forged signature, the smug face of the blonde woman in the text message. "I'm sure." She went to work that day and pretended everything was normal. She attended meetings, reviewed contracts, and made small talk with colleagues. But part of her mind was already 3 steps ahead, planning and strategizing like she was putting together a hostile takeover. Robert came home that evening with flowers and apologies. "Sorry about last night, babe. The work thing ran really late." How was Atlanta? He was a good liar, she realized. Smooth and confident. He looked her in the eye when he spoke, touched her arm affectionately, asked about her trip with what seemed like genuine interest. If she hadn't seen the evidence, she might have believed him. "It was fine," she said, accepting his kiss on the cheek. "Where exactly did you take my car?" "Joe's place on 5th Street. Should be ready in a few days." There was no Joe's place on 5th Street. She'd already checked. "I might stop by tomorrow and see how it's going," she said casually. Something flickered in his eyes. Just for a second. "Actually, Joe mentioned they might need to order a special part. Could take a couple weeks." "A couple weeks? For what kind of repair?" "Transmission issue. You know how those old cars can be." He was already walking toward the kitchen, away from her questions. "What's for dinner?" She made dinner and listened to him talk about his day. Every word was a lie wrapped in casual conversation. He mentioned a client meeting that she knew hadn't happened. She'd called his office that afternoon and his secretary said he'd been out all day. He talked about his coworker Jim's promotion, but Jim had been promoted 6 months ago. After dinner, Robert settled in front of the TV while Vanessa cleaned up. His phone kept buzzing with text messages. Each time it did, he would glance at it with a little smile and then quickly put it face down on the coffee table. "Popular tonight," Vanessa commented. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." She did know. She knew the particular smile he got when he was getting texts from someone he cared about. She'd seen it 1,000 times in the early days of their relationship, when he would text her during meetings and grin at her responses. Now he was giving that same smile to messages from his mistress. Around 10 p.m. his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his face changed. I need to take this. Work emergency. He stepped out onto the back porch to take the call. Through the window she could see him pacing, his free hand gesturing as he talked. His voice was too low to hear, but his body language was animated, excited. This wasn't a work call. When he came back inside, he looked flushed and happy. Bad news, babe. That client situation is heating up. I might need to travel again next week. Where to? Chicago. Probably a few days. She nodded sympathetically. That's a shame. Didn't you just get back from a business trip last week? He paused. He hadn't been on a business trip last week. He told her he was visiting his sick uncle. She watched him scramble to reconcile his lies. Right, yeah. Busy time at work. You know how it is. She went to bed that night lying next to a stranger. Someone who looked like her husband but felt like a completely different person. Someone who could look her in the eye and lie without flinching. Someone who could steal from her and then bring her flowers. Marcus called the next afternoon while she was at work. Can we meet? I have some information you need to see. They met at the same coffee shop. Marcus spread a folder across the table between them, and Vanessa's world shifted again. Her name is Candace Morrison, Marcus said, sliding a photo across the table. It was the same blonde woman from the text message, but this photo showed her more clearly. She was probably 25, with the kind of artificial beauty that came from expensive procedures and careful maintenance. She's been seeing your husband for about 8 months. They met at a bar downtown. She was working as a cocktail waitress, but she quit her job about 6 months ago. Since then, she's been living entirely off money your husband has been giving her. Marcus opened a bank statement. This account belongs to Candace. Your husband has been making deposits every week, sometimes twice a week. In the past 6 months, he's given her over $80,000. Vanessa stared at the numbers. $80,000. More than she made in a year. More than they'd spent on their wedding. More than their emergency fund had ever contained. There's more, Marcus said gently. She has a history. 2 bankruptcies in the past 5 years. Multiple unpaid credit cards. She owes money to at least 6 different creditors, and there are 2 civil judgments against her for unpaid debts. He slid another document across the table. She's also been arrested twice for fraud, once for writing bad checks, once for identity theft. Both charges were dropped, but the pattern is there. She's a professional, Vanessa said quietly. That's my assessment. Your husband isn't her first victim. She targets older men with money, usually married men who won't ask too many questions about where she came from or what she does. Marcus opened another folder. This is where it gets interesting. She's currently living in a luxury condo downtown. Rent is $4,000 a month, paid by your husband. She drives a lease car, also paid by your husband. She has accounts at 5 different high-end stores, all guaranteed by credit cards in your husband's name. Vanessa felt like she was looking at financial statements for a small business, except the business was destroying her marriage and bankrupting her future. The cruise they're planning? Marcus continued. It's not their first trip. They went to Vegas in March, presidential suite at the Bellagio for 4 nights. They spent a weekend in Napa Valley last month. Every trip charged to credit cards that your husband opened without telling you. How much debt are we talking about? Marcus pulled out a calculator. Conservative estimate? Your husband has taken on about $120,000 in new debt in the past 6 months. Credit cards, personal loans, the money he took from your joint accounts, and the cash from selling your car. $120,000. She said it out loud, trying to make it feel real. And that's just what I could trace. There might be more. Vanessa stared at the photographs of Candace poolside at an expensive resort, shopping on Rodeo Drive, sitting in first-class airplane seats. Every image showed a woman living a fantasy life funded entirely by stolen money. What's her endgame? Vanessa asked. Based on her pattern? She'll bleed him dry and then disappear. She's done this before. The last guy she was with, a businessman in Texas, she left him with $200,000 in debt and a foreclosure notice. He never saw her again. Vanessa closed the folder. I want to know everything. Her address, her schedule, who else she's talking to, where she banks, what she spends money on. Everything. Marcus nodded. I'll have a complete dossier by Friday. What are you planning to do with this information? Vanessa looked at the stack of evidence, the photos, the bank statements that told the story of her husband's betrayal. I'm going to teach them both what happens when you steal from someone who understands how money really works. For the first time in days, she smiled. Friday afternoon arrived with Marcus's complete report, and Vanessa realized she had underestimated the scope of Robert's betrayal. She sat in her office after hours, door locked, reading through 40 pages of documentation that painted a picture of systematic deception. Candace Morrison lived at the Pinnacle Towers, the most expensive residential building in the city. Her monthly expenses averaged $15,000 more than most families spend in 6 months. She got weekly manicures at a salon that charged $200 per session. She had a personal trainer, a nutritionist, and a standing appointment at a spa that specialized in services Vanessa had never heard of. But the most interesting discovery was that Candace was getting sloppy. She was behind on several personal debts that predated her relationship with Robert. A payday loan company was looking for her. Her previous landlord had a judgment against her for $8,000. She owed money to a plastic surgery clinic in Miami. Marcus had also traced the sale of Vanessa's Corvette. It had been purchased by James Henderson, a collector who specialized in classic cars. He'd bought it in good faith, believing Robert was the legitimate owner. The car was now sitting in a climate-controlled garage in Beverly Hills. The good news, Patricia Wells explained when Vanessa met with her Monday morning, is that the sale was illegal. Your husband forged your signature, which makes the entire transaction void. We can get your car back. What's the bad news? The buyer is innocent in this. He'll want his money back when we repossess the car. Your husband will be liable for the full amount, plus legal fees, plus damages. Vanessa smiled. That's not bad news. That's perfect. Patricia raised an eyebrow. You're planning something. I'm planning justice. That afternoon, Vanessa opened her own bank account at a different institution. She transferred her paycheck and began quietly moving her personal assets out of joint accounts. She updated her direct deposit, moved her retirement accounts, and made sure her name was removed from as many shared debts as possible. She also did something Robert would never expect. She called James Henderson directly. Mr. Henderson? This is Vanessa Brooks. I believe you recently purchased my 1967 Corvette. There was a pause. I purchased it from Robert Brooks. He said he was the owner. We were both on the title, but he forged my signature on the sale documents. I'm going to be repossessing the car, but I wanted to talk to you first because I don't think you knew about the fraud. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. I paid good money for that car. I know. And you'll get your money back with interest when we sue my husband for theft and fraud. But I have a proposal that might work better for everyone. She explained her plan. Henderson listened without interrupting. That's actually brilliant, he said finally. I'm in. The next phase required careful timing. Vanessa knew Robert was planning another trip with Candace. Marcus had intercepted hotel confirmations for the following week. They were going to San Francisco for 4 days, staying at a hotel that cost $800 per night. While they were gone, she would strike. But first, she needed to document everything. She spent the week secretly photographing every receipt, every credit card statement, every piece of evidence she could find. She made copies of documents Robert thought were hidden. She forwarded herself emails from accounts he didn't know she had access to. She also made a list of every creditor who was looking for Candace Morrison. Thursday evening, Robert came home with champagne and theater tickets. Surprise. I got us tickets to that show you wanted to see. It was a good show and expensive tickets. Under normal circumstances, she would have been thrilled. Now she just wondered how much he'd spent and whether he'd used their joint credit card or one of the secret accounts he'd opened. This is wonderful, she said, accepting his kiss. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to do something nice for my wife? 6 months ago she would have melted at those words. Now she heard them for what they were: a calculated move to keep her distracted while he prepared for his next betrayal. The San Francisco trip is next week, right? She asked casually. His face went blank for just a second. What San Francisco trip? The work thing you mentioned. The client meetings? All right. Yeah, probably. Still working out the details. She nodded and smiled and pretended to believe him. Inside, she was counting the hours until he left. Friday night, he packed a suitcase while she pretended to read in bed. Definitely San Francisco, he said. 3 days, maybe 4. Depends on how the meetings go. I'll miss you, she lied. I'll miss you too. Saturday morning, he kissed her goodbye and drove away in his truck. Vanessa waited exactly 30 minutes, then made a phone call. Marcus? It's time. Phase 1 began immediately. Marcus drove to Candace's apartment building and started taking photographs of her with Robert. They were easy to spot, laughing and kissing in the lobby like teenagers, loaded down with expensive luggage. While Marcus documented their departure, Vanessa drove to her lawyer's office. Patricia had legal papers ready. A lawsuit against Robert for theft, fraud, and forgery. A court order to freeze all accounts pending the outcome of the case. And most importantly, a repossession order for her Corvette. But Vanessa wasn't going to serve the papers yet. She was going to let Robert and Candace have their perfect weekend while she dismantled their lives piece by piece. Phase 2 started Monday morning. Vanessa called every creditor on her list. This is Vanessa Brooks. I'm calling regarding Candace Morrison. I have her current address and employment information. She gave them the address of the Pinnacle Towers. She told them about Candace's expensive lifestyle, her regular schedule, her complete lack of legitimate income. She provided photographs of Candace wearing jewelry worth more than some people's cars. By Monday afternoon, Candace had received visits from 3 different collection agencies. Phase 3 was more complex. Vanessa called the management company that owned Candace's building. I'm calling regarding Unit 4B, currently rented by Candace Morrison. I'm a financial investigator, and I need to inform you that the rent payments on this unit may be coming from fraudulent sources. The person paying the rent is currently under investigation for identity theft and financial fraud. She didn't say Robert was being investigated. She just let them draw their own conclusions. Tuesday morning she received a call from Marcus. They cut the San Francisco trip short. Something spooked them. They'll be back tonight. Perfect timing. Wednesday morning Robert came home looking stressed and confused. Weirdest thing, he said. Candace got some strange phone calls while we were gone. People looking for money she doesn't owe. That is weird, Vanessa said sympathetically. Did you have a good time otherwise? Yeah, it was fine. Work stuff, you know. She knew. She also knew he'd charged $6,000 to their joint credit card for a trip that was supposed to be business related. Thursday afternoon she got the call she'd been waiting for. Mrs. Brooks? This is Janet from Pinnacle Property Management. We need to discuss the situation with Unit 4B. Vanessa scheduled a meeting for Friday afternoon. She also scheduled meetings with 3 creditors, 2 collection agencies, and James Henderson. Friday would be the day everything changed. But first she had one more conversation to have. She called her sister Jennifer that evening. Jen, I need to ask you a favor. A big one. Jennifer had always been protective of her little sister. When Vanessa explained what Robert had done, Jennifer's response was immediate and fierce. What do you need? I need you to trust me for the next few weeks. I'm going to handle this, but it might get messy before it gets better. Do you want me to come stay with you? Not yet, but soon. I might need backup. You've got it. Whatever you need. After she hung up, Vanessa sat in her living room and looked around at the house she'd thought was her home. Next week everything would be different. Robert would know she knew. Candace would realize her perfect setup was falling apart. The lies would be exposed, the theft would be revealed, and the consequences would begin. She was ready. Friday morning dawned clear and cold, perfect weather for demolition. Vanessa dressed in her most professional suit, navy blue with subtle pinstripes, the one that made bank presidents take her seriously. Today she would need every ounce of credibility she'd spent 10 years building. Her first meeting was at 9 a.m. with Janet Morrison from Pinnacle Property Management. Janet was a harried-looking woman in her 50s who managed luxury properties for people who preferred to remain anonymous. Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming in. Your call earlier this week raised some serious concerns about Unit 4B. Vanessa spread the documentation across Janet's desk. Bank statements showing the payments to Candace, credit reports revealing her history of fraud, and photographs Marcus had taken of her expensive lifestyle. The rent payments are coming from stolen money, Vanessa explained calmly. My husband has been embezzling from our joint accounts to fund this woman's lifestyle. When he's arrested for fraud, which will happen very soon, those rental payments will stop immediately. Janet studied the documents with growing alarm. We require all tenants to pass background checks and prove legitimate income. Did Candace Morrison pass a background check? Janet pulled out a file. She provided references. Employment verification from a restaurant downtown. What restaurant? Chez Laurent. Vanessa pulled out her phone and dialed the number for Chez Laurent. She put it on speaker. Chez Laurent, this is Michelle. Hi Michelle, I'm calling to verify employment for Candace Morrison. She listed you as her employer. I'm sorry, who? We don't have anyone by that name working here. Vanessa looked at Janet, who was now pale. Michelle, has anyone by that name ever worked there? No ma'am. I've been the manager here for 3 years and that name doesn't ring a bell. Vanessa hung up. Falsified employment records. That's fraud number 2. Janet was already pulling out lease termination paperwork. I'd recommend moving quickly, Vanessa advised. This situation is about to become very public, and you don't want your building associated with criminal activity. Her next meeting was with Detective Rodriguez at the police station. This time she had enough documentation to file criminal charges. Forgery, identity theft, embezzlement, and fraud, Detective Rodriguez said, reviewing the evidence. This is a solid case. How much money are we talking about? At least $120,000, probably more. He's been systematically draining our accounts for 8 months. We'll need to coordinate with the district attorney's office. A case this complex could take several months to prosecute. I understand. But I'd like to file charges now before he has a chance to hide more evidence. Detective Rodriguez nodded. We'll issue a warrant for his arrest by Monday morning. Vanessa's afternoon meetings were even more productive. She met with 4 of Candace's creditors and provided them with detailed information about her current assets, location, and income sources. She's living at the Pinnacle Towers in Unit 4B, Vanessa explained to Mike Santos from Premier Credit Recovery. She has designer clothes worth at least $50,000, jewelry worth probably twice that, and she's currently in possession of a lease car paid for by my husband. Mike grinned. We've been looking for her for 2 years. She owes us $15,000. She's easy to find now. She gets her nails done every Tuesday at 2 p.m. at Elite Spa downtown. She has a personal trainer at Gold's Gym on Thursdays. She shops at Nordstrom every weekend. By 4 p.m., Vanessa had given Candace's information to 6 different creditors. She'd also provided them with photographs Marcus had taken, showing Candace wearing expensive jewelry and designer clothes. Her final meeting of the day was with James Henderson, the man who'd bought her Corvette. I've been thinking about your proposal, Henderson said. It's unconventional, but I like it. When do we make the switch? Tomorrow morning. My husband thinks he's meeting someone about a business deal. Instead, he's going to find out what it feels like to lose something precious. Saturday morning, Robert left early for what he thought was a breakfast meeting with a potential client. Vanessa had arranged the meeting using a fake email account and the name of a legitimate businessman she'd looked up online. While Robert sat in a restaurant waiting for someone who would never show up, Vanessa drove to Beverly Hills with James Henderson. Her Corvette was exactly as beautiful as she remembered. Sitting in Henderson's climate-controlled garage, it looked like a piece of automotive art. Red paint gleaming, chrome bumpers perfect, interior restored to showroom condition. I've enjoyed having it, Henderson said, running his hand along the hood. But it belongs with you. They completed the paperwork quickly. Henderson signed the title back over to Vanessa, and she signed an agreement guaranteeing he would be compensated when Robert was prosecuted for fraud. Driving her Corvette home felt like getting a piece of her soul back. The engine purred exactly the way she remembered. The leather seats welcomed her like an old friend. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly happy. But her happiness was tempered by what she knew was coming next. Robert's phone was buzzing frantically when she got home. She could hear it from the garage. He was calling over and over, probably confused and angry about his mysterious no-show breakfast meeting. She parked the Corvette in the garage and closed the door. Then she went inside and waited. He came home 20 minutes later, furious. Some idiot wasted my entire morning. Set up a meeting and didn't show up. I waited for an hour. That's terrible, Vanessa said sympathetically. Did you ever figure out what happened to my car? I thought it was supposed to be ready by now. Robert froze. His face went through several emotions in rapid succession: confusion, panic, calculation, and finally forced calm. Still waiting on that part, he said carefully. Should be soon. Maybe I should call the shop directly. No. He said it too quickly, too loudly. I mean, no need. I'll handle it. They don't like customers calling directly. She nodded as if that made sense. Okay. I trust you. The lies were getting harder for him to keep straight. She could see him mentally scrambling, trying to remember what he'd told her and when. He was making mistakes, leaving gaps in his stories that even someone less suspicious than Vanessa would notice. Sunday passed quietly. Robert was distracted, constantly checking his phone. Candace was probably telling him about the creditors who'd started calling, about the strange visits from collection agencies, about the building management asking questions about her lease. Their perfect setup was developing cracks. Monday morning, Vanessa went to work as usual. At 10 a.m., she got a call from Detective Rodriguez. We executed the warrant at your husband's workplace. He's been arrested and is currently being processed. What happens next? He'll be arraigned this afternoon. Given the amount of money involved, Bail will probably be set pretty high. Will I need to be there? Not for the arraignment. But we'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. Vanessa hung up and sat quietly in her office for a moment. It was done. Robert was in custody, and soon the whole world would know what he'd done. Her phone rang again. This time it was Candace. Mrs. Brooks? This is Candace Morrison. I think there's been some kind of mistake. Vanessa's heart rate spiked, but her voice remained calm. I'm sorry, who is this? I'm a friend of your husband's. Look, Robert's been arrested and I think it has something to do with some misunderstanding about money. I was hoping we could talk. I'm not sure what this has to do with me. Please. Candace's voice was desperate now. I need help. People are calling me saying I owe them money. Someone came to my apartment this morning and said they're going to repossess my car. I don't understand what's happening. Vanessa smiled. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can help you. You might want to call a lawyer. She hung up and immediately called Marcus. Candace just called me. She's panicking. She should be. Her building manager just called her with a 30-day eviction notice. And Premium Auto Leasing is repossessing her car this afternoon. How do you know all this? I may have made a few phone calls this morning. As a concerned citizen, of course. At lunch, Vanessa drove home to check on things. As she pulled into her driveway, she saw a tow truck pulling away from the Pinnacle Towers across town. She could see it from her elevated neighborhood. Even from a distance, she could make out a white BMW being loaded onto the flatbed. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Please call me. I'm begging you. I don't have anywhere else to turn. Vanessa deleted the message. That evening, she called her sister Jennifer. It's happening, she said simply. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I don't. I feel free. You should feel free. You did nothing wrong. I know. But watching someone's life fall apart, even someone who deserves it, it's surreal. Robert made his choices. So did his girlfriend. They're dealing with the consequences of their own actions. Jennifer was right, but Vanessa still felt strange about the power she'd wielded. With a few phone calls and some strategic information sharing, she dismantled two people's lives in less than a week. Tuesday morning brought more developments. Patricia Wells called with updates. Robert made bail, but just barely. His parents had to mortgage their house to cover it. And here's the interesting part: Candace Morrison was arrested yesterday evening. For what? Outstanding warrants. Turns out she had unpaid tickets in 3 different counties, plus a warrant for failure to appear on a previous fraud charge in Nevada. She's currently in county lockup. How long will she be there? Depends on whether she can make bail. But given her history of skipping court dates, the judge set it pretty high. Vanessa spent the rest of the day working, but her mind kept wandering to Robert. He was probably home now, sitting in their house, trying to figure out how everything had gone wrong so quickly. He'd lost his job. His company had terminated him immediately upon his arrest. He'd lost his mistress. She was in jail with no way to contact him. And soon he'd lose much more. She drove home that evening wondering if he'd be there, what he'd say, how he'd try to explain himself. His truck was in the driveway, but the house felt empty. She found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a pile of legal documents. Hello, Robert. He looked up at her with eyes she'd never seen before, defeated, desperate, and angry all at once. You did this, he said quietly. I did what? Don't play dumb, Vanessa. The timing is too perfect. My arrest, Candace's problems, everything falling apart at once. You orchestrated this. She set down her purse and looked at him calmly. I reported crimes to the appropriate authorities. If that's what you mean by orchestrating, then yes, I did that. I can explain everything. Can you explain forging my signature? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Can you explain stealing $120,000 from our joint accounts? Silence. Can you explain lying to me for 8 months while you funded another woman's lifestyle with money I earned? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen, Robert? Were you planning to leave me? Or were you just going to keep stealing until there was nothing left? He buried his face in his hands. I love her. For words that might have broken her heart 6 months ago. Now they just made her tired. That's fine. You can love her from your jail cell. Vanessa, please. We can work this out. I'll pay everything back. With what money? You don't have a job. You don't have savings. You spent everything on a woman who's currently in custody for fraud. My parents? Your parents mortgaged their house to pay your bail. Are you planning to destroy their financial security too? Robert looked at her with something like recognition. You're different. Yes, I am. I'm not the person who trusted you blindly while you robbed me. I'm not the person who made excuses for your lies. That person is gone. She walked toward the stairs, then turned back. I'll be staying at Jennifer's for a while. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Don't try to contact me. What about us? What about our marriage? Vanessa paused on the bottom step. You ended our marriage when you forged my signature. You ended it when you chose her over me. You ended it when you decided I was someone you could steal from without consequences. I never meant to hurt you. That's the problem, Robert. You never thought about me at all. She packed a suitcase while he sat in the kitchen, not moving, not speaking. As she carried her bags to the car, she realized she felt lighter than she had in months. The last thing she did before leaving was walk into the garage and start her Corvette. The engine roared to life, powerful and perfect. She backed out slowly, savoring the moment. Through the kitchen window, she could see Robert watching her leave. He looked small and broken, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. Vanessa drove toward her sister's house with the windows down and the radio up, feeling the cold evening air rush through her hair. For the first time in 8 months, she knew exactly where she was going. Jennifer's house felt like a sanctuary. Warm lights, comfortable furniture, and the smell of fresh coffee created an atmosphere of safety that Vanessa hadn't realized she'd been missing. Her sister had prepared the guest room with clean sheets, fresh flowers, and a bottle of wine that they opened immediately. Tell me everything, Jennifer said, curling up on the couch with her glass. Vanessa recounted the past 2 weeks, the discovery, the investigation, the careful dismantling of Robert and Candace's perfect setup. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from anger to admiration to something like awe. You're brilliant, Jennifer said finally. Cold, calculating, and absolutely brilliant. I don't feel brilliant. I feel tired. You should be proud. Most people would have just screamed and cried and made threats. You built a case like a prosecutor and executed it like a general. Wednesday morning brought news that made Vanessa's coffee taste sweeter. Marcus called while she was getting ready for work. Candace made bail, but here's the interesting part: she can't afford her apartment anymore. Building management is expediting her eviction, and all her credit cards have been frozen pending investigation. Where is she going to go? That's the beautiful part. She has nowhere to go. Her family cut her off years ago. She doesn't have any real friends, just people she knew through the money she was spending. And she can't go back to Robert because he's broke too. What about Robert? He's trying to get his job back, but his company won't even return his calls. And he's got legal bills piling up that he can't afford. Vanessa felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy, but it passed quickly. Any word on when the trial might happen? Preliminary hearing is next month. Trial probably won't be for 6 months, maybe longer? Good. That gives me time. Time for what? To make sure they understand that actions have consequences. That afternoon, Vanessa did something she hadn't done in years. She left work early. She drove to the Pinnacle Towers and parked across the street, watching the building where Candace had lived her fantasy life. At 3 p.m. she saw them. Candace and Robert standing outside the building with suitcases and boxes, looking lost and desperate. Candace was crying, her perfect makeup streaked and ruined. Robert was on his phone, probably trying to find someone who would help them. Vanessa watched as they loaded their belongings into Robert's truck. 8 months of stolen luxury reduced to whatever could fit in the back of a pickup. As they drove away, Vanessa felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not happiness exactly, but the settled feeling of a job well done. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she recognized the voice immediately. Mrs. Brooks? This is Candace. Please don't hang up. What do you want? I want to apologize. I want to explain. I want to make this right somehow. Vanessa sat in her car, watching the building where Candace no longer lived, and listened to the woman who had helped destroy her marriage. I never meant for it to go this far, Candace continued. I never wanted to hurt you. Robert told me you two were having problems, that you were practically separated already. And you believed him? I wanted to believe him. He was so generous, so sweet. He made me feel special. With my money. I didn't know it was your money. I thought he was rich. I thought he was successful. You thought you'd found someone to take care of you. Candace was quiet for a moment. Yes. At least she was honest about that much. Mrs. Brooks, I'm begging you. Is there anything I can do? Any way to fix this? I have nothing left. No money, no place to live, no job. Robert's parents won't even talk to me. I'm sleeping in my car. Vanessa could hear the desperation in her voice, the fear of someone who'd been living a fairy tale and suddenly found herself in the real world. "You can get a job," Vanessa said simply. "You can learn to support yourself instead of looking for someone else to pay your bills. You can stop being a predator and start being a productive member of society." "I don't know how." "Then learn." Vanessa hung up and sat in her car for a long time, thinking about consequences and justice and the strange satisfaction of watching karma work. Thursday brought an unexpected visitor to her office. Robert's mother, Linda, appeared at Vanessa's door looking older than her 65 years. "May I come in?" Vanessa gestured to the chair across from her desk. Linda had always been kind to her, treating her like the daughter she'd never had. Now she looked broken, aged by her son's actions and their consequences. "I came to apologize," Linda said without preamble. "What Robert did to you is unforgivable. I raised him better than that. You don't need to apologize for him." "I feel like I do. I feel like I failed somehow." Linda's hands shook as she reached into her purse. "I brought you something." She pulled out a check made out to Vanessa for $10,000. "Linda, I can't accept this. It's not enough, I know. But it's what we can afford right now. Tom and I talked about it and we want you to have it. We know it doesn't fix anything, but—" Vanessa looked at the check, knowing what it represented. Robert's parents had probably scraped together every dollar they could find to offer her this small gesture of restitution. "Keep your money," Vanessa said gently. "You'll need it for Robert's legal fees. We're not paying his legal fees. We paid his bail because he's our son, but we're not funding his defense. He made his choices. Then keep the money for yourselves." "I don't need it." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Vanessa. I'm sorry he hurt you. I'm sorry he threw away the best thing in his life. I'm sorry we're going to lose you too." That almost broke Vanessa's composure. Linda and Tom had always been wonderful in-laws, loving and supportive. They didn't deserve to lose their relationship with her because of Robert's actions. "You're not losing me," Vanessa said. "Robert's actions don't change how I feel about you and Tom. But the divorce doesn't mean we can't stay in touch. You'll always be family to me." Linda cried openly then, and Vanessa came around the desk to hug her. They held each other for a long moment, two women connected by love for someone who had disappointed them both. After Linda left, Vanessa sat alone in her office and realized that not all consequences were satisfying. Some were just sad. Friday afternoon brought better news. Detective Rodriguez called with an update on the case. "We've recovered additional evidence. Your husband had a safety deposit box you didn't know about. It contained cash, jewelry he'd bought for the Morrison woman, and documentation of other fraudulent activities." "What kind of other activities?" "Looks like he'd been skimming from client accounts at work. Small amounts over several months, but it adds up to about $40,000. So it wasn't just our money. No. He was stealing from his employer and their clients too. This makes it a much more serious case." "How much more serious?" "Federal charges are possible. Mail fraud, wire fraud, potentially RICO violations if the prosecution decides to be aggressive. He's looking at 10 to 20 years if convicted on all counts." Vanessa sat down hard. 20 years. Robert would be in his 60s when he got out. His life, for all practical purposes, would be over. "Mrs. Brooks? Are you still there?" "Yes, I'm here. 20 years is a long time." "It is. But financial crimes at this level carry serious penalties, especially when there are multiple victims." After she hung up, Vanessa drove to the coffee shop where she'd first met Marcus. She needed to think, and she needed to do it somewhere that felt neutral. 20 years. When she'd started this process, she'd wanted justice. She'd wanted consequences. She'd wanted Robert and Candace to understand that stealing had costs. But 20 years felt like more than consequences. It felt like destruction. Her phone buzzed with a text from Robert. "Can we talk? Please?" She stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I don't think that's a good idea. I know you hate me. I know you'll never forgive me. But I need to tell you something important." Against her better judgment, she typed back, "What? I never stopped loving you. Even when I was with her, even when I was lying to you, I never stopped loving you. I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I needed you to know." Vanessa read the message 3 times before deleting it. Love without respect wasn't love at all. It was selfishness wearing a disguise. But as she drove back to Jennifer's house, she found herself thinking about the man she'd married 8 years ago. The man who'd brought her flowers for no reason, who'd supported her through graduate school, who'd cried when she'd miscarried their baby 5 years ago. That man had become someone who could forge her signature and steal her car. That man had become someone who could lie to her face while funding another woman's lifestyle. People changed. Sometimes they changed into someone you couldn't recognize, someone you couldn't trust, someone you couldn't love anymore. But 20 years was still a long time. That night, she called her lawyer. "Patricia? It's Vanessa. I have some questions about plea bargains." Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth and the kind of bright sunlight that made everything look sharper, more defined. Vanessa dressed carefully in a coral-colored suit that made her feel confident and alive. Today would be the day everything came together. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Vanessa arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early and sat on a bench outside the courtroom, watching lawyers and defendants and families navigate the bureaucracy of justice. Robert arrived at 9:45 with a public defender who looked barely old enough to practice law. He'd lost weight in the past 2 weeks, and his clothes hung loose on his frame. When he saw Vanessa, he stopped walking. They looked at each other across the hallway for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then Robert approached her slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal. "Vanessa, I didn't know you'd be here. I'm the primary victim. Of course I'm here." He sat down on the bench beside her, maintaining careful distance. "You look good. Happy. I am happy. I'm glad. I mean that." She studied his face, looking for signs of the man she'd married. He was still there, underneath the stress and exhaustion and shame. But he felt like a stranger wearing Robert's features. "The prosecutor says you might get 20 years. Robert nodded. "My lawyer thinks we can plea it down to 5, maybe 7. 5 years is still a long time. It's what I deserve." They sat in silence until the bailiff called their case. Inside the courtroom, Vanessa listened as the prosecutor read the charges. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, embezzlement, and theft. The dollar amounts sounded enormous when read aloud in the formal language of the law. Robert pled not guilty to all charges as his lawyer had advised. The judge set a trial date for 6 months out and increased Robert's bail due to the additional charges that had been filed. After the hearing, Vanessa found herself alone with Robert outside the courthouse. His parents had been there, sitting in the back row, but they'd left quickly without speaking to either of them. "I heard you talk to my mother," Robert said. "She came to see me. She wanted to apologize." "She shouldn't have to apologize for me." "No, she shouldn't." Robert kicked at a loose piece of concrete. "I've been thinking about what you said. About not thinking about you at all. And? You were right. I thought about myself, about what I wanted, about how she made me feel. I never thought about what it would do to you." "Why?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "Why wasn't I worth thinking about? Why wasn't our marriage worth protecting?" Robert was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. I wish I had a better answer than that, but I don't know. That's not good enough." "I know it's not. But it's the only answer I have." A car pulled up to the curb, a beat-up Honda that Vanessa didn't recognize. Candace was in the passenger seat, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. She looked smaller than she had in Marcus's photographs, diminished somehow. "I have to go," Robert said. "My truck got repossessed yesterday." "Where are you staying?" "A motel out by the highway. It's temporary until I can figure something else out." Vanessa watched him walk toward the Honda. Candace didn't look at her, just stared straight ahead as Robert got into the car. They drove away without speaking, two people bound together by the destruction they'd caused. That afternoon, Vanessa drove to the offices of Premier Credit Recovery. Mike Santos, the collections manager she'd spoken to the week before, greeted her with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just won the lottery. "Mrs. Brooks. Perfect timing. We just finished processing the Morrison account." He spread paperwork across his desk like a dealer showing a winning hand. "We recovered $12,000 in jewelry, $8,000 in designer clothes, and a Rolex that appraised for $15,000. Plus we garnished what was left in her bank account, about $3,000. "So she's paid off her debt to you?" "Most of it. She still owes us about $2,000, but given her current circumstances, we're willing to call it even." Vanessa nodded. "What about the other creditors?" "They're working their own cases, but the pattern is the same. She had a lot of expensive stuff, but most of it was purchased with stolen money. The courts are treating it as recoverable assets." "Meaning?" "Meaning she's going to end up with nothing. Whatever she doesn't lose to creditors, she'll lose to restitution payments when your husband is convicted." Mike leaned back in his chair with satisfaction. "People like Candace Morrison think they're smart, think they can live off other people's money without consequences. But eventually the bill comes due." Vanessa left the meeting feeling oddly hollow. She'd wanted justice and justice was being served. But watching someone's life systematically dismantled, even someone who deserved it, didn't feel as satisfying as she'd expected. Tuesday brought an unexpected phone call from Detective Rodriguez. "Mrs. Brooks, we've had an interesting development. Candace Morrison wants to cooperate with the prosecution." "What does that mean?" "She's willing to testify against your husband in exchange for reduced charges on her own case." Apparently she kept detailed records of everything he gave her, amounts, dates, even photographs. Why would she keep records? My guess? She was planning to blackmail him eventually. Or maybe she just liked documenting her lifestyle. Either way, it's good news for the prosecution and bad news for your husband. How bad? With her testimony and the documentation she can provide, the case becomes almost impossible to defend. Your husband's lawyer will probably start pushing hard for a plea bargain. That evening, Vanessa called Patricia Wells to discuss the implications. If Robert takes a plea bargain, what kind of sentence are we looking at? Depends on what he pleads to. If he admits to all the charges, probably 7 to 10 years. If he cooperates fully and provides restitution, maybe 5 to 7. And if he doesn't take a plea? With Morrison's testimony? He's looking at the full 20 years. Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Do you think I'm being vindictive? Going too far? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Vanessa, your husband stole over $120,000 from you. He forged your signature. He systematically lied to you for 8 months while he funded another woman's lifestyle. If this were any other kind of theft, if a stranger had done this to you, would you feel guilty about prosecuting? No. The fact that he was your husband makes it worse, not better. He violated your trust in the most fundamental way possible. But 20 years. 20 years is what the law says people who commit these crimes deserve. You didn't write the laws. You're just enforcing them. Wednesday afternoon, Vanessa received a call that surprised her. It was from Tom, Robert's father. Vanessa, honey, could you meet me for coffee? There's something I need to discuss with you. They met at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where retirement-age couples came for afternoon pastry and quiet conversation. Tom looked tired and older than his years, but his handshake was still firm and his eyes were still kind. "How are you holding up?" he asked after they'd ordered. "Better than I expected. How are you and Linda?" "It's been hard. Watching your child self-destruct is every parent's nightmare." Tom stirred his coffee slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I wanted to talk to you about the plea bargain. Robert's lawyer says the prosecutor might be willing to negotiate." "What kind of negotiation?" 5 years in minimum security if he pleads guilty to all charges and agrees to full restitution. "Tom, I can't influence the prosecutor's decision. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to think about whether you want to." He pulled out a folder and spread documents across the table. Robert signed these yesterday. A complete financial disclosure, surrender of all assets, and an agreement to turn over his entire salary for the next 15 years to pay restitution. Vanessa looked at the papers. They were thorough and comprehensive, essentially making Robert a ward of the court for the next decade and a half. He'll live in a studio apartment, drive a used car, eat basic food, and send every extra penny to you until the debt is paid off, Tom continued. Plus 5 years in prison to start. Why are you showing me this? Because I want you to know that he understands what he did. He's not trying to escape consequences. He's trying to make amends. Tom leaned forward. Vanessa, I know you don't owe him anything. I know he destroyed your marriage and betrayed your trust. But I also know that 20 years will destroy him completely. He destroyed himself. Yes, he did. But you have the power to decide whether that destruction is complete or whether there's room for redemption. Vanessa stared at the documents. Complete financial surrender for 15 years. It was more than she would ever recover through a lawsuit, more than she could realistically expect even if Robert worked for the rest of his life. I need to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. Tom gathered up the papers and stood to leave. Vanessa, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. And thank you for not cutting us out of your life. Linda and I, we still think of you as our daughter. After he left, Vanessa sat alone in the cafe and tried to sort through her feelings. Justice and revenge were different things, but sometimes the line between them was blurrier than she'd expected. 5 years was still a significant punishment. Complete financial restitution was more than most fraud victims ever saw. And Robert would spend the rest of his productive life paying for his mistakes. But was it enough? That evening, she drove her Corvette through the hills outside the city, windows down, radio playing songs that reminded her of better times. The car handled perfectly, responding to her touch like it was part of her. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vanessa realized she had a choice to make. Not just about Robert's sentence, but about who she wanted to be going forward. The woman who discovered his betrayal would have wanted maximum punishment, complete destruction, total revenge. But the woman driving her reclaimed Corvette into the sunset felt different. Stronger. More confident. Less interested in revenge and more interested in rebuilding. She pulled over at a scenic overlook and called Patricia Wells. Patricia? It's Vanessa. I want to talk to the prosecutor about that plea bargain. The meeting with District Attorney Sarah Chen took place on Thursday morning in a conference room that smelled like coffee and ambition. Sarah was younger than Vanessa had expected, with sharp eyes and an expensive suit that suggested she took her job seriously. Mrs. Brooks, I appreciate you coming in. I understand you've been presented with a plea bargain proposal. I have. I wanted to discuss the terms. Sarah spread the case files across the table. Before we get into specifics, I want you to understand something. This case is solid with or without your input. Morrison's testimony alone would be enough to convict your husband on most charges. But you're willing to negotiate? We're always willing to consider arrangements that serve justice while being practical about court resources. A guilty plea saves taxpayer money and guarantees a conviction. Vanessa looked at the photographs Marcus had taken Robert and Candace laughing together, shopping with stolen money, living a fantasy funded by her work and her trust. What exactly is being offered? Your husband pleads guilty to all charges. 5 years in minimum security federal prison, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. During those 10 years, every penny he earns above basic living expenses goes to restitution payments. How much would that actually amount to? Sarah consulted her calculator. Assuming he finds employment making $40,000 per year after release, and allowing for basic housing, food, and transportation, he'd pay approximately $15,000 per year in restitution. Over 10 years, that's $150,000. More than he stole. Yes. Plus interest and penalties. Vanessa was quiet for a moment, thinking. What happens to Candace? Morrison gets 2 years in minimum security followed by 5 years probation. She's also required to pay restitution, though obviously her earning potential is more limited. And if Robert doesn't take the plea? We go to trial. With Morrison's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, I'm confident we'll get convictions on all counts. He'd be looking at 15 to 20 years. Sarah leaned back in her chair. Mrs. Brooks, can I speak frankly? Please. I've been prosecuting financial crimes for 8 years. I've seen a lot of cases like this: trusted spouses who steal, partners who embezzle, people who think they're too smart to get caught. Most of them never really accept responsibility. And Robert? Your husband's financial disclosure is the most comprehensive I've ever seen. He's liquidating everything: his retirement accounts, his life insurance, even his tools and sports equipment. He's not hiding assets or trying to game the system. Sarah pulled out another document. He also wrote this. It was a letter addressed to Vanessa, written in Robert's familiar handwriting. Sarah handed it to her, and Vanessa read it slowly. Vanessa, I know there's nothing I can say that will make up for what I did to you. I know that sorry isn't enough when someone steals your car, forges your signature, and lies to your face for 8 months. I've been trying to understand how I became someone who could do those things to someone I love. I think I got caught up in feeling important, in being needed by someone who seemed to depend on me completely. It made me feel powerful in a way I hadn't felt in years. But none of that excuses what I did. I stole from you. I betrayed your trust. I chose someone else over the person who'd been loyal to me for 8 years. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for another chance. I'm just asking for the opportunity to spend the rest of my life making it right. The plea bargain means I'll lose my freedom for 5 years and my financial independence for 15 years after that. But it also means I can start paying you back immediately instead of sitting in prison for 20 years with no way to make amends. I know you don't owe me anything. But if you're willing to support this plea arrangement, I promise you'll get back every penny I stole, plus interest, plus enough extra to compensate you for the pain I caused. I hope someday you can think of me without anger. I hope someday you can remember the good parts of our marriage without them being poisoned by what I did at the end. I hope you find someone who deserves you. Robert. Vanessa read the letter twice, then set it down carefully on the table. He wrote this himself? She asked. Yes. His lawyer actually advised against it. Admissions of guilt can complicate plea negotiations. But your husband insisted. Vanessa stared at the letter. It felt different from his previous apologies. Less desperate, more honest. Like it came from someone who finally understood the magnitude of what he'd done. I need some time to think about this. Of course. But I should mention that we need an answer by Monday. If we're going to change course, we need to do it before the trial preparation gets too far along. Friday morning, Vanessa called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Instead of going to the office, she drove to the coast and spent the day walking on the beach, thinking about justice and forgiveness and the difference between the two. Her phone rang around noon. It was Marcus. I've got some news you might find interesting. Candace Morrison tried to contact 3 different tabloids this week, trying to sell her story. What story? The whole thing. Rich businessman's wife gets revenge on cheating husband and his gold-digging mistress. She was shopping it around for $50,000. Did anyone bite? Nope. Turns out fraud and embezzlement aren't sexy enough for the tabloids unless there's a celebrity involved. Vanessa almost laughed. Even in defeat, Candace was looking for an angle, a way to profit from the destruction she'd helped cause. There's more, Marcus continued. She also applied for 3 different credit cards this week, using false employment information. She's still running scams? Leopards and spots, you know? Some people never learn. That evening, Vanessa had dinner with Jennifer and told her about the plea bargain offer. What are you leaning toward? Jennifer asked. I don't know. Part of me thinks 5 years isn't enough. Part of me thinks 20 years is too much. What does your gut tell you? Vanessa considered the question. My gut tells me that I'm tired of thinking about Robert and Candace. I'm tired of being defined by what they did to me. So you want to accept the plea? I want to move on. And I can't move on while this case drags through the courts for the next 2 years. Jennifer nodded. That makes sense. But make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. What would be the wrong reasons? Guilt. Sympathy. Feeling sorry for him because he wrote you a nice letter. Vanessa shook her head. It's not sympathy. It's practical. 5 years in prison plus 15 years of financial servitude is real punishment. And I get my money back faster this way. Then it sounds like you've made your decision. Saturday morning, Vanessa drove back to the courthouse. Not for any official business, but because she wanted to see the place where her old life would officially end and her new one would begin. The building was quiet on weekends, but the steps were still populated with people who had business with justice. A young mother with 2 children, probably there for a custody hearing. An elderly man in an expensive suit, likely dealing with probate court. A teenager with his parents facing the consequences of some youthful mistake. Everyone had a story. Everyone had choices that had led them to this building, this moment, this reckoning with the law. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Candace. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because I got caught, but because I hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Vanessa stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, get a job. Support yourself. Stop looking for people to take care of you. I am. I got hired at a diner downtown. Night shift, minimum wage, but it's honest work. Good. Keep it that way. Can I ask you something? What? Do you think people can change? Really change? Vanessa looked up at the courthouse, thinking about Robert's letter, about Candace's apparent job at a diner, about her own transformation from trusting wife to strategic adversary. I think people can change, she typed back. But only if they want to badly enough. I want to. Then prove it. To yourself, not to me. She didn't get a response and she didn't expect one. Sunday evening, Vanessa called Patricia Wells. I've made my decision about the plea bargain. And? I want to accept it. But I have some conditions. What kind of conditions? I want quarterly reports on the restitution payments. I want confirmation that both Robert and Candace are meeting their obligations. And I want the right to object if either of them violates the terms of their probation. That's all reasonable. Anything else? Yes. I want a formal apology from both of them in writing as part of the plea agreement. Not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging what they did and taking responsibility. I can arrange that. Then let's do it. Monday morning, the plea hearing was held in the same courtroom where the preliminary hearing had taken place. But this time the atmosphere was different. Quieter. More solemn. Robert and Candace sat at separate tables with their lawyers. Both had dressed formally, Robert in a suit that was too big for him now, Candace in a simple black dress that made her look younger and more vulnerable. The judge reviewed the terms of the plea agreement carefully. 5 years for Robert, 2 years for Candace, followed by probation and restitution payments. Both defendants would plead guilty to all charges. Mr. Brooks, do you understand the terms of this agreement? Yes, Your Honor. And you're entering this plea voluntarily with full understanding of the consequences? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Morrison? Yes, Your Honor. I understand. The judge looked at both defendants for a long moment. This court has reviewed the evidence in this case, and I want to be clear that these crimes represent serious violations of trust. Mr. Brooks, you stole from your wife, forged legal documents, and engaged in systematic fraud over a period of 8 months. Ms. Morrison, you knowingly participated in and benefited from these crimes. Both defendants nodded. However, both of you have accepted responsibility for your actions and agreed to make full restitution. The court will accept these plea agreements. The gavel came down with finality. Afterward, in the hallway, Robert approached Vanessa one last time. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me. Thank the justice system for offering you a second chance. Will you be okay? Vanessa really looked at him for what she knew would be the last time. I'll be better than okay. I'll be free. Robert nodded and walked away with his lawyer to begin the process of surrendering himself to federal custody. Candace lingered for a moment as if she wanted to say something, but Vanessa walked past her without acknowledgement. Outside the courthouse, Patricia Wells handed Vanessa a folder containing all the legal documents. It's over, Patricia said. How do you feel? Vanessa took a deep breath of clean air and looked up at the blue sky. Like I can finally start living again. That afternoon, she drove her Corvette to the beach and sat on the sand, watching waves crash against the shore. The rhythmic sound was peaceful, hypnotic, like the earth's own way of saying that everything passes, everything changes, everything eventually finds its way to where it needs to be. Her phone rang. It was her boss, probably wondering when she'd be back to work. But for the first time in months, Vanessa let it go to voicemail. She had more important things to do than answer someone else's questions about deadlines and quarterly reports. She had a life to rebuild. 6 weeks later, Vanessa stood in the living room of her new apartment, watching movers carry the last of her furniture up 3 flights of stairs. The space was smaller than the house she'd shared with Robert, but it was entirely hers. Hardwood floors, tall windows, and a view of the city that made her feel like she was on top of the world. The divorce had been finalized the week before. Since Robert was in federal prison and had signed over all assets as part of his plea agreement, the proceedings had been straightforward. Vanessa got everything: the house, the cars, the savings accounts, even Robert's tools and golf clubs. She'd sold the house immediately. Too many memories, too many conversations that had been lies, too many nights she'd slept beside someone who was stealing from her. The new apartment felt clean, hopeful, like a place where she could write a different story. Jennifer arrived with pizza and wine just as the movers were leaving. It looks amazing, Jennifer said, surveying the space. Very you. What does that mean? Clean lines, no clutter, everything in its place. Like your mind. They ate pizza sitting on boxes in what would eventually be the living room, toasting Vanessa's new life with wine drunk from coffee mugs. Any word from prison? Jennifer asked. Robert calls once a week. Very brief conversations. He asks how I'm doing, tells me he's adjusting okay, says he's working in the prison library. How do you feel about those calls? Strange. Like talking to someone I used to know a long time ago. Vanessa sipped her wine thoughtfully. He sounds different. Smaller somehow. Less sure of himself. Prison will do that. It's not just prison. I think he finally understands what he lost. Jennifer nodded. What about Candace? She sent me a letter last month. Handwritten, 3 pages long. Mostly apologizing, but also telling me about her job at the diner and the night classes she's taking to get her GED. Do you believe she's changed? I think she's trying to change. Whether she succeeds is up to her. They unpacked boxes until nearly midnight, talking and laughing in a way that reminded Vanessa of college, when the future felt infinite and everything seemed possible. The next morning, Vanessa woke up in her new bedroom and realized she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Excitement about the day ahead. She dressed carefully for work, a new suit in emerald green that made her feel powerful and confident. Over the past 2 months, she'd thrown herself into her job with renewed energy, landing 3 major clients and earning a promotion that came with a significant salary increase. Her boss, William Chin, called her into his office around 10 a.m. Vanessa, I wanted to talk to you about the Henderson Industries account. Henderson Industries, the investment firm owned by James Henderson, the man who had bought her Corvette. They'd stayed in touch after the car transaction, and Henderson had been impressed enough with her financial acumen to offer his company's business. "They've been very happy with your work," William continued. "Henderson specifically requested that you handle their portfolio expansion into the Southeast market. That's a $50 million account." "Yes. And they want to offer you a position as their Director of Strategic Investments. Salary would be $180,000, plus bonuses, plus equity." Vanessa sat back in her chair. 6 months ago, she'd been married to a man who was stealing her money and living a lie. Now she was being offered her dream job by someone who respected her professional abilities. "What would you say if I told you I was interested?" William smiled. "I'd say congratulations and ask if you'd be willing to stay until we find your replacement." That afternoon, Vanessa drove her Corvette to Henderson Industries for a formal interview. The building was gleaming glass and steel, the kind of place where serious money was managed by serious people. James Henderson met her in the lobby personally. He was older than she'd expected, probably in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of making good decisions. "Mrs. Brooks, or do you prefer Ms. now?" "Ms. Brooks is fine." "Ms. Brooks, thank you for considering our offer. I'll be honest with you, I've been following your situation somewhat closely." "Oh." "Not in an intrusive way. But when someone handles a difficult personal situation with the kind of strategic thinking you demonstrated, it tells me something about their character." He led her to a conference room overlooking the city. "You could have been vindictive. You could have sought maximum punishment regardless of the consequences. Instead, you found a solution that served justice while being practical about the future. I'm not sure it was that calculated. Maybe not. But the result was elegant. Your ex-husband faces real consequences but also has the opportunity for redemption. You get full restitution plus the ability to move forward with your life. Everyone wins in their own way." The interview lasted 2 hours. They discussed investment strategies, market analysis, and her vision for expanding into new markets. Henderson asked tough questions and listened carefully to her answers. "One last question," he said as they wrapped up. "What do you want to achieve in this role?" Vanessa thought about the past 6 months, the discovery, the investigation, the careful dismantling of her old life and the strategic construction of a new one. "I want to build something lasting," she said. "Something that can't be taken away by someone else's poor choices." Henderson smiled. "You're hired." That evening, Vanessa celebrated by taking her Corvette for a long drive through the mountains. The car handled the winding roads perfectly, engine purring with satisfaction. Every curve and acceleration feeling like a conversation between driver and machine. At a scenic overlook, she parked and called Marcus. "I wanted to thank you," she said when he answered. "For what?" "For helping me get my life back." "You did that yourself. I just provided information." "Still, if you ever need a reference or a favor, call me." "Actually, there is something. I'm starting my own investigation firm. Could use a partner with your kind of strategic thinking." Vanessa laughed. "Thanks, but I think I'm done with investigating people's secrets. I'm more interested in building futures than uncovering pasts." "Fair enough, but the offer stands." As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Vanessa thought about the woman who had sat in this same spot 6 months ago, crying over a man who had betrayed her trust and stolen her car. That woman had been broken, confused, unsure of what to do next. This woman knew exactly who she was and where she was going. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Brooks, this is Candace. I graduated from my GED program last week. I wanted you to know. I also wanted to thank you for not destroying me completely when you could have. I'm trying to be better." Vanessa read the message twice, then typed back, "Congratulations. Keep moving forward." She put her phone away and started the Corvette. The engine roared to life, and she drove back toward the city with the windows down and the radio playing songs that made her feel young and free and limitless. Behind her, the mountains faded into darkness. Ahead of her, the city lights beckoned like stars, full of promise and possibility. At a red light, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at her was confident, successful, and completely in control of her own destiny. She had been tested, challenged, betrayed, and stolen from. But she had emerged stronger, smarter, and more certain of her own worth than ever before. The light turned green, and Vanessa Brooks drove toward her future, knowing that whatever came next, she was ready for it. 1 year later, Vanessa stood on the balcony of her corner office at Henderson Industries, watching the city wake up beneath a canopy of golden sunlight. Her coffee was still steaming in her hands, and the quarterly reports spread across her desk showed numbers that made her smile. The Southeast expansion had exceeded all projections, bringing in $200 million in new investments. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. "Anniversary dinner tonight?" My treat. It was indeed an anniversary of sorts. 1 year since she'd discovered Robert's betrayal, 1 year since she'd started the process of reclaiming her life. Jennifer had been tracking the date, insisting they needed to celebrate how far Vanessa had come. The morning brought a familiar ritual: the monthly restitution report from the probation office. Robert had been released after serving his full 5-year sentence in 18 months due to good behavior and participation in rehabilitation programs. He was now working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm, making $35,000 a year and living in a studio apartment. Every month, like clockwork, he sent $1,200 in restitution payments. He'd also included a brief note with this month's payment: started taking community college classes at night. Studying to become a certified financial counselor. I want to help people avoid the mistakes I made. Vanessa filed the report without emotion. The payments were on schedule, Robert was meeting his obligations, and his attempts at rehabilitation seemed genuine. But he felt like a character from someone else's story now, someone she'd known in a different lifetime. Around noon, her assistant knocked on her door. "Miss Brooks? There's someone here to see you. Says it's personal." Vanessa looked up from her computer to find Candace Morrison standing in her doorway. But this wasn't the polished, artificially enhanced woman from Marcus's photographs. This Candace wore a simple blue dress and minimal makeup. Her hair was its natural brown color, cut in a practical shoulder-length style. She looked normal. "Real. I hope you don't mind me coming here," Candace said nervously. "I called your old office and they gave me this address." "What do you want?" "To thank you. And to show you something." Candace reached into her purse and pulled out a small newspaper clipping. It was from the community college newsletter, showing a photograph of this year's honor roll students. Candace's name was on the list. "I'm graduating next month with an associate's degree in business administration. I've been working at the diner for 18 months now, and I just got promoted to assistant manager." Vanessa studied the newspaper clipping. "Congratulations. I also wanted to give you this." Candace handed her an envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000 made out to Vanessa. "I know it's not much compared to what I cost you, but it's every penny I've been able to save over the past year and a half. I wanted you to have it." Vanessa looked at the check. $5,000 represented months of minimum wage work, careful budgeting, and disciplined saving. For someone starting over from nothing, it was a significant sacrifice. "I can't accept this. Please. I need to do this. Not for you but for me. I need to know that I'm the kind of person who pays her debts." Vanessa studied Candace's face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. But all she saw was a young woman trying very hard to be someone better than she'd been before. "Keep your money," Vanessa said finally. "Use it for school or save it for your future. But stop trying to pay for someone else's crimes." "What do you mean?" "Robert stole from me. You participated, but he was the one with the responsibility, the marriage, the duty to be honest. You were just looking for someone to take care of you." Candace's eyes filled with tears. And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I was so weak that I let someone else's marriage get destroyed just so I could live in a nice apartment and wear expensive clothes." "Are you still weak?" "I don't think so. I support myself now. I make my own decisions. I pay my own bills." Candace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm dating someone, a guy from my accounting class. He doesn't know about Robert, about the trial, any of it. He just knows me as I am now." "Are you going to tell him?" "Eventually. When I'm sure he cares about who I am more than who I used to be." Vanessa handed the check back to Candace. "Then use this money to build that future. Stop trying to fix the past." After Candace left, Vanessa sat at her desk thinking about redemption and second chances. Not everyone deserved them, but some people worked hard enough to earn them. That evening, she met Jennifer at their favorite restaurant, a small Italian place with excellent wine and food that reminded them of their college backpacking trip through Europe. "So," Jennifer said, raising her glass. 1 year later. "How do you feel?" "Grateful," Vanessa said without hesitation. "Grateful that I found out who Robert really was before I wasted any more years with him. Grateful that I had the skills and resources to fight back. Grateful that I came out stronger instead of broken. No regrets." "About Robert?" "None." "About the marriage?" "Some." "I regret that I was so focused on work that I didn't notice what was happening in my own house. I regret that I trusted too easily. But I don't regret how I handled things once I found out. They ate and talked and laughed until the restaurant began closing around them. As they prepared to leave, Jennifer asked the question Vanessa had been expecting. Are you ready to date again? I think so. Maybe. I've been so focused on rebuilding my career and my life that I haven't really thought about it. There's this guy at my firm. Investment banker, never married, really smart. I could introduce you. Jennifer. Just think about it. You're allowed to be happy, you know. You're allowed to trust again. Driving home in her Corvette, Vanessa thought about trust and happiness and the possibility of sharing her rebuilt life with someone new. For the first time in over a year, the idea didn't scare her. Her phone rang as she pulled into her parking garage. It was a number she didn't recognize, but when she answered, the voice was familiar. Vanessa? This is Tom. Robert's father. Tom, hi. How are you and Linda? We're good. Listen, I wanted to call because Robert asked me to pass along a message, but he didn't want to bother you directly. What kind of message? He wanted you to know that he's getting married. Vanessa pulled into her parking space and turned off the engine. Married? To a woman he met in his financial counseling program. She's a single mother, has 2 kids. Lost her house in a foreclosure a few years back. Robert's been helping her with budgeting and financial planning. That's good for him. He wanted you to know because he's moving to Phoenix after he completes his probation. His fiancée has family there, and he's been offered a job with a non-profit that helps people in financial crisis. Will that affect the restitution payments? No, he'll keep sending those until the debt is paid off. But he wanted you to know that he's trying to build something positive out of what he learned from his mistakes. After Tom hung up, Vanessa sat in her car in the quiet garage processing the news. Robert was moving on, building a new life, trying to use his experience to help others avoid the financial destruction he'd caused. She felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just a mild curiosity about how people could change so completely that they became entirely different versions of themselves. Upstairs in her apartment, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her balcony, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Robert was probably telling his fiancée about his past, about the woman he'd betrayed and the life he'd destroyed through his own selfishness. Somewhere else, Candace was probably studying for finals or working late at the diner, building a life based on her own efforts instead of someone else's money. And here she was, Vanessa Brooks, successful and independent and finally, completely free from the wreckage of her old life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Seriously though, think about the banker. His name is Steven, he's 38 and he has great arms. Vanessa laughed and typed back, send me his number. For the first time in 2 years she was ready to find out what came next. 18 months later, Vanessa stood in front of her bedroom mirror, adjusting the neckline of a dress that made her feel beautiful and confident. The fabric was a deep sapphire blue that complemented her skin tone, and the cut was classic enough for a formal dinner but modern enough to make her feel like herself. Steven was picking her up in 20 minutes for dinner at the new rooftop restaurant downtown. They'd been dating for 8 months now and tonight felt different somehow. More significant. Jennifer had dropped hints about Steven shopping for rings, but Vanessa tried not to think too much about that. She'd learned to live in the present, to appreciate what was instead of worrying about what might be. Her phone rang as she was putting on earrings. The caller ID showed a number from Phoenix. Hello? Vanessa? This is Robert. She sat down on her bed, surprised. He hadn't called in over a year, not since he'd moved to Arizona and started his new life. Robert, how are you? I'm good. Really good. But I'm calling because I need to tell you something, and I wanted you to hear it from me first. Okay. I'm being featured in a magazine article next month. About financial recovery and helping people rebuild after making terrible mistakes. The writer wanted to interview you about what happened between us. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. And? I told them no. I told them that part of my story belongs to you and you've moved on with your life. You shouldn't have to relive our marriage for the sake of my redemption story. I appreciate that. There's something else. The article mentions that I'll be speaking at a financial literacy conference in your city next month. I wanted you to know in case you see publicity about it. I don't want you to be surprised. Will you want to see me? Robert was quiet for a long moment. Part of me will always want to see you. But I know that wouldn't be good for either of us. I'm married now and you're building your own life. Some doors should stay closed. I think you're right. Vanessa? Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? She looked around her bedroom at the photos of her and Jennifer and Steven, at the awards from work, at the life she'd built entirely on her own terms. Yes, I'm happy. Good. That's all I wanted to know. After he hung up, Vanessa sat quietly for a moment, processing the conversation. 2 years ago, Robert's voice would have brought back anger and hurt and 1,000 painful memories. Now it just felt like talking to someone from her distant past, someone who'd once been important but now belonged to a different chapter of her life. Stephen arrived exactly on time as he always did. He was punctual, reliable, and honest, qualities that Vanessa had learned to value above charm or excitement. He brought her flowers, told her she looked beautiful, and held her hand as they walked to his car. "Good day?" he asked as they drove toward the restaurant. "Interesting day. I got a call from my ex-husband." Stephen glanced at her. They talked about Robert before, about the fraud in the trial and the divorce. Stephen knew the basic facts, but Vanessa had never gone into detail about the emotional aftermath. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine. He's speaking at a conference here next month. Just wanted to give me a heads up." "Do you want to see him?" "No. That part of my life is over." Stephen nodded and squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you told me." The restaurant was exactly as beautiful as the reviews had promised. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and their table was perfectly positioned to catch the sunset. Stephen ordered wine and they talked about work, about Jennifer's latest dating disaster, about the vacation they were planning for next month. "Vanessa," Stephen said as their dessert arrived, "I have something I want to ask you." Her heart rate quickened, but she kept her expression calm. "What's that?" "I've been offered a promotion. Senior partner track, but it would mean relocating to the London office for 2 years. "That's wonderful. You've been working toward partner for years." "I haven't accepted yet." "Why not?" Stephen reached across the table and took her hand. "Because I don't want to leave you. Because what we have is more important to me than any promotion." Vanessa looked at this man who was willing to sacrifice his career advancement for their relationship. A year ago, the gesture would have panicked her. The idea of someone making major life decisions based on her needs would have felt like too much pressure, too much responsibility. Now it just felt like love. "What if I came with you?" Stephen's eyes widened. "Would you want to do that?" "Henderson Industries has been talking about opening a European office. I could propose London as the location, ask to head up the expansion." "Are you serious?" "I think so. I've built my life here, but it's a life I can take anywhere. And London sounds like an adventure." Stephen leaned across the table and kissed her. "I love you, Vanessa Brooks." "I love you too." They talked about logistics and timelines and the practical aspects of relocating internationally. But underneath the planning and details, Vanessa felt something she hadn't experienced in years: excitement about sharing her future with someone else. A month later, she stood in the departure lounge at the airport, waiting for their flight to London. Henderson had approved her proposal for the European expansion, and Stephen had accepted his promotion. They were moving together, starting fresh in a new city where neither of them had history or baggage. Jennifer was there to see them off, alternately crying and taking pictures and making them promise to call every week. "I can't believe you're leaving," Jennifer said for the 10th time. "It's only 2 years. And you have an open invitation to visit whenever you want." "It won't be the same." "No," Vanessa agreed. "It'll be different. But different can be good." As they boarded the plane, Vanessa looked back at the city where she'd built her new life, where she'd learned to trust herself again, where she'd discovered that betrayal could make you stronger instead of breaking you. Then she looked forward, toward Stephen in London and whatever adventures waited for them there. The plane lifted off into a clear blue sky, carrying her toward a future that was entirely her own choice, built on love instead of lies, trust instead of betrayal. 6 hours into the flight, as they flew over the Atlantic Ocean, Stephen reached into his carry-on bag and pulled out a small velvet box. "I was going to wait until we got to London," he said, "but I can't wait anymore." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Vanessa Brooks, will you marry me?" She looked at the ring, at Stephen's hopeful face, at the clouds passing below them as they flew toward their new life together. 2 years ago, marriage had meant betrayal and lies and stolen money. Now it meant partnership and honesty and building something beautiful together. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Like it had been made for her, like this moment had been inevitable from the day she decided to fight for her own worth instead of accepting someone else's definition of what she deserved. As the plane carried them across the ocean, Vanessa Brooks, soon to be Vanessa Brooks' chin closed her eyes and smiled. She'd started this journey as a woman who'd lost everything to someone else's greed and selfishness. She was ending it as a woman who knew exactly what she was worth, exactly what she wanted, and exactly how strong she was when she decided to fight for her own happiness. The best revenge, she'd learned, wasn't destroying the people who'd hurt you. The best revenge was building a life so beautiful, so successful, so full of genuine love and joy that their betrayal became nothing more than a footnote in your much larger story. And that's exactly what she'd done.